Thank everyone for coming out again on this very busy but much more beautiful Tuesday than last Tuesday. I also wanted to thank everyone who is watching live on the live stream and who listens to it afterwards. I got a lot of wonderful feedback from people over the past week, people who watched it on the live stream, people who watched it afterwards, and it's very gratifying and very humbling to know that people are watching and interested and have some really lovely things to say. I'm very excited about today's sonata. It's one of my favorites. It's the Tempest Sonata. The Tempest Sonata is number 17. It's in D minor, which means it has the notes D, E, F, G, A, B flat. There's a B flat in that scale. Okay. It's part of the Opus 31 collection. Very often, publishers publish the opuses by sets of either 3 or 6. This is number 2 in the set of 3. It was last week we spoke a little bit about Beethoven's 3 composition periods. There were his early years, very much in the style of Haydn, and as he develops and continues to grow as a composer, he becomes much more individualized, develops a much more unique style. And this is part of his middle period, which also contains the 5th Symphony and the Eroica. And it's part of a time period, this piece in particular is also around the time where he's figuring out that his deafness is steadily getting worse and will eventually be permanent. This is also a tumultuous time. And again, you have the C minor symphony, the famous the 5th Symphony, all in this period. The nickname The Tempest came from a story that we have from Anton Schindler, one of his associates, that said that Beethoven was inspired by Shakespeare's The Tempest while composing. The truth is that beyond getting a sense of the storminess of, or let's say the extreme drama of the sonata, no one has yet been able to figure out any character references, any plot developments. It's the nickname has stuck, but as quickly as people have given it the title, which Beethoven did not, it's also been tossed aside. There's a question as to whether or not Schindler has all sorts of interesting stories about Beethoven and what Beethoven said, and there are always questions as to A, whether or not it ever happened, and B, whether or not if they did happen, whether or not they were serious or not. Like Beethoven could have, the other famous story from the 5th Symphony is that I said this last week also, that's fate knocking at the door. Maybe. Beethoven could have said it, could have not said it. Even if he did say it, doesn't mean he meant it seriously. You've just been just throwing it out there. And it could have, and I wouldn't overread into it. But the great thing about this sonata is the incredible drama that it provokes. It is really unique amongst the sonatas in a number of ways. I dare say that this is amongst probably the sonata that has had the most ink spilled over it in terms of analysis. There are the music theorists have gone at it over the past 2 centuries trying to figure it out and what does it mean and how does it develop and what are the main ideas, what are the main themes. Until this day, people are debating back and forth how exactly the structure gets laid out. Last week we spoke a bit about sonata form, the idea of the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation, a recap of what happened, the return to the home key. In the Pathétique, it's almost very clear. You have a real sense that Beethoven's playing with the motivic ideas, the motifs that are involved. In The Tempest, all these things are really shaded in gray. It's not clear where the exposition begins. It's not, we have a strong sense of where the development is pretty clear, but the exposition itself is shrouded in a huge amount of gray area. And we'll take a listen to the introduction, and I'll point out why that is, but I don't want to say anything definitively, but it is up for great debate. That being said, Carl Czerny is probably the most famous student of Beethoven. He studied with the composer himself, and those of you who have played piano or have children or grandchildren who play piano have probably been cursed with the Czerny exercises from a young age. Czerny wrote several books of really basically etudes, teaching children and teaching adults how to play scales and runs and all sorts of different passages in order to develop their technique. So he's when we talk about Carl Czerny, we're really talking about someone who is very interested in piano pedagogy. So he wrote about this sonata that this sonata is consummate. The unity of musical ideas and the tragic character, the form that is uninterrupted by any episode, the romantic picturesque of the complete tone picture never fail to make the greatest effect, if the fantasy of the player stands on the same high level with his dexterity. And it's an amazing thing, and to think about that, of all the sonatas that Beethoven wrote, he really thought that this one, there's something perfect and totally complete about it. It is extremely evocative, and the different sections really do have very different characters to them. The overall structure is as follows, and we'll get into the particulars of it as we listen and I point them out. But the overall structure is as follows. It's broken down into three large movements, a movement being a large section of music. They're related to each other, but not necessarily there's a break between them and generally related. The first section is broken into a largo section and an allegro. The largo is very slow. Largo means slow, and allegro is quick. And it's in the solid home key of D minor. The next section, the slow movement, the adagio, is in B flat major. I didn't really speak about this last week, but it's worth noting that Beethoven is particularly known for his adagios. Those second movements are just exquisitely crafted. The melodies are so wonderful and beautifully moving. It's really those adagio movements are worth a lot of attention. And the last movement is allegretto, which is slightly slower than the allegro, but still at a quick clip. And of course, it's up to the performer to figure out exactly what does allegro mean, what does largo, what does allegretto mean, and it's back in the home key of D minor. This sonata has all movements in a basic sonata form. There's room to expand it. The adagio has a very, very, very brief development section, if any at all, and that's okay. It's still considered a sonata form, and the largo and the allegretto section are really more in standard sonata form. Now, last week we started talking about what are the issues that are being worked out, and what I mean, what's Beethoven getting at? And again, I want to put aside the biographical issues and the inner turmoil, the inner psychological analysis of Beethoven. When I talk about musical issues, there are motifs, there are notes, there are ideas that get played out over the course of the sonata. Now, there are three opening motifs, and this immediately causes us theorists a bit of a problem, and in that it's not clear if the beginning is a slow introduction, right? Sometimes sonatas have slow introductions, like the Pathétique had a slow introduction at the beginning. And then it launches into the quick exposition. Here we have, it starts slow, then alternates fast. Starts slow, and then alternates fast. And it's not clear, and then it launches into a real allegro section, but it's not clear at all if the first several measures are an introduction, or is it actually landing right in the exposition. And there's really a play on that, and it's really not clear. But either way, the opening has the following motifs. Turn my seat around a little bit. There's the arpeggio that opens it. An arpeggio is just a broken chord. It's an A major arpeggio with a C sharp in the bass. That's the first idea. Now, Beethoven already builds into it something that's a little bit destabilizing. What we might expect is that if we're going to start with an A major chord, first of all, we're in D minor. So that's 5 away. That's not unusual to go from A major to D minor. That's fine. But there's something destabilizing about the fact that there's the C sharp in the bass. It's as if Beethoven took the chord and inverted it. The chord is made up of A, C sharp, and E, and instead of playing A, C sharp, and E, he starts with the C sharp. And it's always major. Whether it's this or this, it's still a major chord, but it's certainly less stable. And there's also, by doing that, there's a certain softness to it. There's almost there's a real delicacy to it. It's also marked PP, pianissimo. I don't know if I'll get it on this piano, but it's really supposed to be very soft. I know this is not going to quite do it, but it's really supposed to be coming out of nowhere. And then you suddenly rise up until you get to this higher A. The next section, that's the first main motif, is the allegro. So you have this psi motif. And you land there. Again, the psi motif is common in certainly Baroque music and early music. It's not, it's very violin-esque. You imagine an orchestra, violin, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And each one is got a little slur on it. And there's the danger. Beethoven used to say, when I was studying this piece, I had a teacher who used to say that is like dusting off the keys. You're wiping it. I'm glad when I was doing research, I was glad to see that Beethoven used to say the same thing. So I'm glad that the tradition got passed down from generation to generation. And dusting, Beethoven described as just dusting off the keys. Now the danger is for young pianists, if they try to articulate each one, kind of miss the goal. And you kind of want to do that. Like if you're, at the same time as trying to get the overall effect, we also try to, pianists try to get as much clarity as possible. It could be clear as well as this effect of just moving down the keyboard. Okay, and it's just meant to go to this home of D. We're descending into D while at the same time the bass is rising. You have that whole thing together. The rising bass and the descending right hand. Landing right here is the goal, and then you have the third main motif, this turn. That's the last idea that he's going to play with. Also an adagio slow. There's a debate as to whether or not, because Carl Czerny said that when he studied with the composer, he had this note. Most editions have the following, as opposed to debate rages on. It's not clear. There's certainly room for both, in terms of that there's good reason to believe that Czerny had that note right. There's also good reason to suspect that the other note is correct, and it's up for debate. So those are the three ideas that played out: the arpeggio, the sigh, and then the turn. And then it's going to happen again, a new key. We're going to get the arpeggio, we're going to get the sigh, and we're going to continue with the sigh motif that's going to land us all the way down. And then we're going to launch into the next section. This area over here is where it becomes unclear as to whether or not this is the actual start of the exposition, or is it the start of the exposition right at the beginning? That's where the debate comes in. And you could read it different ways. That's okay. Either way, you could say that the exposition in the beginning, you could start the exposition right away at the beginning and say that there's a substantial exposition that shifts tempos, or you could say that there's a rather short exposition that begins in that area, which also, here's the melody. It's that arpeggio that comes back. Dun. And then it's answered by, which is the turn idea, right? It's just for the same thing, but different key. So we have the arpeggio, answer. Arpeggio, answer. Arpeggio. I repeated that one, sorry. And then it continues onward, okay? So those are, you have the three opening motifs. The next main issue that I want to point out is this deal with the G sharp and A flat. G sharp and A flat on the piano are the same thing. They're the same black note. However, in terms of music theory, they're very different and they imply very different things. G sharp, it's kind of like, it's called an enharmonic, where you have the same pitch spelled differently. I compare it to a musical homonym. You could say meet and meet, but they mean very different things. And this G sharp and A flat gets played out also against the whole thing. And there's a play on that homonym. How does Beethoven spell it? And where does it go? G sharp wants to pull to an A. A flat wants to pull downwards. And how Beethoven spells it and moves from key to key really depends on that spelling. And it's going to pop up over and over and over again. This G sharp is going to play, I'll point it out during the recording, where it's going to pop up in structurally significant moments. That motif of this idea of the G sharp A flat does not get resolved until the last movement, some 20 minutes later. It's introduced right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, you have it's this really in the turn idea. Here it is. And you have the G sharp here. You have that right built in there. and it's going to play out it's going to play out and be a part of the tug of war between those two notes until the very last movement. The other thing that I want to bring to your attention before we launch into the listening is this idea of moving back between D minor and the harmony of B flat. It's a very unusual move, and Beethoven starts to explore this move of the third a lot, and it's going to be a major issue. Probably his most famous piece that does that is his Ninth Symphony. The Ninth Symphony moves from D minor to B flat. This might be an early attempt to see how that will work out, because it's an unusual area to move to in terms of the harmony. You don't expect it. I mean, the other thing that makes it a little bit more expected is that certainly in the beginning here, in large sections of this, where it's in B flat minor. That's going to play itself out over the course of the composition as well. So there's a lot of things that are going on over the course of this piece. Lots of different motifs get played out, the different tempi that are being explored. There's a lot of new material which really leads theorists to that's why all the spilled ink. It doesn't line up the way we would expect it to line up. It doesn't play by the rules of sonata form. So we try to figure that out. How's Beethoven bending the rules? Where are the new areas that he's going to? I mean, when we talk about Beethoven, the revolutionary, the avant-garde composer, these are the seeds of it. I mean, maybe even obviously early beforehand, but these are the really revolutionary gestures that sensitive listeners pick up on. It's really one of the amazing things about great music is that you're always hearing new things, and that you're always learning new things about the piece. And I remember for the longest time when I was studying this piece, there's this one area where the bass just goes down in the beginning, and it sinks down, and there's this G sharp, and it just didn't look right on the paper. It was always a difficult section for me, and it just didn't look right. When I had a chance to think about it in the context of what Beethoven's working out, it just made so much more sense that G sharp would be the issue. And there's a reason it stuck out, and I was saying that there's a reason why he wanted it to stick out, and there's a reason why he also marks it fortissimo, and I'll point out that section when we get to it. You want that really loud. That's how he's telling you that's significant. In terms of the performances today that I have for you, there are two different pianists that I want to share with you today. One is Arthur Schnabel, and the other is Wilhelm Kempff. Those are the two. They are very well known for their Beethoven interpretation. Schnabel, in particular, is really considered the interpreter of Beethoven in the early 20th century. He edited some editions of the Beethoven sonatas. He is like a student of a student of a student. He was of Carl Czerny, so he has that direct line to Beethoven himself. Make of that what you will. But there is that type of student of a student of a student of a student. It leads to Schnabel, and it's also it's a big deal in the piano world. You studied with a student of Schnabel, so you continue on that tradition of that type of playing. The other is, we'll listen to him in the third movement, is Wilhelm Kempff, similarly from the earlier part, mid 20th century. A German pianist. Really, between the two of them, they really have it covered. Last week we listened to a recording by Rubinstein that I love, but Rubinstein was certainly more known for his interpretations of Chopin than he was for Beethoven. Rubinstein is just so great at the shading and the coloring and so perfect for Chopin. Schnabel and Kempf are, they think about structure, they think about expression, but everything is very much drawn from the text and very much related to what Beethoven wrote and the score itself. So the first movement that we're going to be listening to is a performance by Schnabel. Again, we don't have any video to accompany Schnabel's playing, so you could ignore the pictures in the back of the YouTube clip. And I was saying before we went live about the problem with YouTube clips, in that the files are condensed, the sound files are condensed, in order to make it uploadable and downloadable all very quickly. I highly recommend listening to them on your own, getting the actual CD or record. It really does make a difference. You will hear things in the CD and on the record and other and more immediate type of media that you'll just not hear on YouTube. But YouTube has the benefit of being very fast and accessible, and it gives you lots of different options right away. So let me pop out of the presentation mode and let's take a look. Got the picture of the score, so in some ways that'll be actually helpful. So you could follow along on the score as you listen to Schnabel's rendition of the opening of the first movement of The Tempest. that breath back. One of the most unusual aspects right here, you have a almost improvised recitative, almost like you're borrowing it from opera. So calm. Doesn't stay. Maybe now you'll rest. We're moving to the flat side of things, but notice what the big last A flat is. Remember, A flat, G sharp. Lands on that A flat, but what is it really? Oh, it's actually maybe a G sharp respelled. He does that so beautifully. The end just fades away. There's this tug of war. Where are we going? But what's the sound? Is it orchestral? You know, these big sounds. Is it those big sounds, or is it the sound of the recitative? So delicate, so individual. Of course, he never holds on to any of it. You think it for one moment, this is, you're going to take a deep breath and sigh because we've arrived on this beautiful F sharp major chord, and you think it's all going to be okay. And you end up in the highest regions. Oh yeah. And he's going to pull you right back into the drama. That's part of the heritage. That is part of. There's a lot of technique borrowed, the orchestral technique, from the Mannheim composers. There's a school of composers based in Mannheim, where the court was, and they had certain orchestral techniques. One of them is known as the Mannheim rocket. That would be this type of motif, this rising arpeggio, creates a lot of drama, and so is that holding of the end. You think you're okay, and then plunged right back into it. But the whole thing gives the effect of creation from the start. When I think about this piece, I also think about two pieces besides it. One is Haydn's Creation, which was composed just a few years before and tells the story of the creation, the whole Bible story, with angels and chaos, and there's no form, and everything is void, and there's emptiness, and suddenly order gets created. You know, you have right in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. If we have time, I'll share that piece. But it reminds me so much of this. You have all this chaos, and something comes into existence, and then chaos, and then comes out, and then you have this solitary, this lone voice, just calling out in the recitative, and it's so central, and it's so beautiful, so delicate. And he plays it so beautifully, and it articulates everything, but so very delicately. Last week I don't feel like I gave you enough of the Adagio section, so I don't want to spend too much time not sharing the rest of the piece with you. So let's move into the Adagio. Now we're moving solidly from, and that, before I move, the end on that D minor, the arpeggios, that just disappear into nothing. And it's just a low rumble, little thunder. The storm clouds are passing, maybe, I'm not sure, but they're in the distance, and it just dies away. And now he shifts to B flat major, and he begins with the arpeggio motif. I'll let Schnabel play it for you. No need to listen to me. This is the exposition. second harmonic area, F major. That's where we would want it to go. If you want to call this a development, this is where it would be. Recapitulation. Back home. pause right there, right, and it leads you so beautifully, ends on that quiet B flat. Let's switch over to Kemp. If we have time, we'll come back to here. Schnabel will also play the last movement. I don't know if we will, but Kemp playing the last movement is really incredible. The last movement is quick, it's allegretto, it's in sonata form, and you have the harmonic motion, the chord changes that take place are so beautiful and so colorful that it really carries things along. I don't want to talk about it too much. We'll talk about it, and I'll point out things as we go through it just to show you where the harmonies start to shift. D minor is hammered home. There's the bass. whisper. You don't expect it. You had 20 minutes, 25 minutes of sonata, and yet it dies on in a whisper. It does not go out with a bang. Totally the opposite, totally understated, and it's just like that. I mean, the worlds of this versus the dreaminess and those different shadings, the different areas, these diminished chords have so much tension, but they're so dreamy, and so these harmonic areas are just so colorful, and you just gotta play them differently. It's not, and it's look, every interpreter and every pianist will have his or her own style of performing them, but there is that the best stay as faithful as possible to the score, because Beethoven really knew what he was writing. He really knew how to write, and it's worthwhile to take those considerations and his practice and what he wrote very seriously, in terms not only of the notes but also of the performing dynamics and the phrasing and the articulation, because all of the issues that we spoke about are all in there. They're in there. The G sharp, A flat, maybe you heard it, maybe this is new and you didn't hear it, and need more listening. I don't think we're going to get to to Schnabel playing that movement, but you can find it on YouTube easily enough. But it's worth hearing him play it also. And if you want something totally different, I also said that last week we would listen to a little bit of Glenn Gould playing it. He has a very unorthodox style of playing most everything, and that includes Beethoven. But the interesting thing about the Tempest is that it continues to be shrouded in mystery. That ultimately there's a lot of clarity that comes from a lot of other sonatas, and every time you hear it, there's always something new and something interesting but more clarifying. The Tempest seems to hide itself a little bit more. That the newness of it and the way that we hear it changes from time to time. Sometimes I think for sure the opening is just an introduction, and sometimes I'm sure that it's actually there's no introduction and it's just an exposition upon which everything else is built. But that's the beauty of the Tempest, that it continues to the emotional charges there, the musical material, of course, is there, and there's so much mining to do, and the truth is that thoughtful performers will think about that, and might think of it, and you could make that performance as an introduction and play it like that, or change it and make it the real exposition, and think about it that way also, and it does impact the performance. Before we conclude, because I see that we're out of time, I just wanted, next week we're going to talk about perhaps one of the most famous sonatas, the Great Appassionata. It's really, this was emotional and moving. The Appassionata is really a tour de force. It's a bit longer, but it's got a huge wallop to it, and its motion and its harmonic changes we'll talk about it, but just as, if not more radical than the Tempest in many ways. Some resources that I have found indispensable if you want further reading is, these are classics. A Companion to Beethoven's Pianoforte Sonatas by Donald Tovey. It's a really a bar by bar description of all of the sonatas. Very worthwhile, if a bit dense. You really have to know your music theory to be able to get through it. Not as dense, and a really wonderful resource is this Charles Rosen's Beethoven's Piano Sonatas. Charles Rosen is a wonderful author, writer, musicologist, scholar in the area of classicism. He wrote a fantastic book on sonata form, and really worthwhile reading. And this book is new for me, but I have found it to be wonderful. The Beethoven Sonatas and the Creative Experience. Professor Kenneth Drake has really written a very, very fine book. Also a bit technical in terms of the music theory, but did a really fantastic job. Again, I encourage you to, on your own, listen to the Kemp full version, Schnabel's full version of this. I also think it would be, if we had time, I also wanted to conclude with a short piece of the Ninth Symphony, which I think that this is very much linked to, particularly that if you remember that motif, there's a recitative that comes out right in the middle of the Ninth Symphony. You have all this orchestral stuff going on, and then you have, really not doing it justice, but just to point it out in case you wanted to check it out at home, as I scroll through this video, you have a ton of orchestral noise. With the recitative right in the center. Let's just say that we'll call that extra credit. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your attention, and thank you very much for being here today. Signing off.
Yeah, very good.